Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's session on the current state of small business. And I'm thrilled to be able to have or announce that we've got David Limbrick joining us, who's a member of Parliament. And I've watched a lot of his footage and journey throughout these last 12 to 18 months, and it's been great to just know that there are people out there that have got a good, strong, stable voice. So, David, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here.
And we also have Ron Lesh, BGL's Managing Director and CEO, founder, been in as a chartered accountant, has been in the industry for a long, long time, and understands accountants well, understands the industry really well, and has experienced firsthand what it's taken to really navigate through this time and get to where we are. So, Ron, thank you for joining us too.
It's great. And it's a real pleasure to have David with us.
Yeah, it is. And look, and today's session is really about what's taking place out there in small business and what's happening in the state, really, of Victoria, which we're actually seeing taking place throughout the whole of Australia. And just to set the context, we want to be able to just go through a number of things and events that are really impacting not only our lives, but also the lives of many of our clients and many individuals, families, small businesses. And what we're going to go through is the small business landscape, like what's going on. We're looking at some data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and some data from other sources, which give us a really good indication as to what's taking place within the business community across Victoria and predominantly really across Australia. And then we're going to have David just give a really good overview and summary of just some of the things that he's seeing and hearing and what his response would be to some of the measures that have taken place and some of the things that we need to consider when it comes to looking at the government's responses and effectiveness of what they're announcing. And then we're going to touch a little bit on the accountants and what they need to know. And then we're going to look at a little bit about support and funding and the measures that are out there that are available to assist you and your clients get through this period of time. And I'm rapt to be able to say that we have Andrew Vanderbeek from Illuminate, who's provided us with a fantastic summary of all the financial resources available to our clients. So we're going to jump straight into the presentation and the latest lockdowns. We've pulled out some data here, and in Sydney and Victoria, just these latest lockdowns have cost us somewhere between around about $10 billion. In New South Wales, it's costing us 220 million a day. In Victoria, about 150 million a day. And the cost primarily is being borne by private businesses and privately employed people. Now, David, what are you seeing that's taking place? And do these figures resonate with what you're hearing?
Yeah, look, I think, and thanks, Daniel. Look, I think it's probably understated in lots of ways. I mean, these are only the immediate economic costs. As I'm sure many small business people would be aware, there's like longer term costs here as well with, missed opportunities and things like that that have happened. But I mean, one of the things that many businesses have spoken to me about is, and this has been the hardest thing to manage, is that it's almost impossible to plan anything because we've had this situation where the government has effectively taken away risk management from businesses. Normally businesses are really good at managing risk. They look at regulatory and compliance risk and legal risk and financial risk and market risk and all these sorts of things. And they've been suddenly put in this situation where their ability to do that has been taken away and been assumed by the government and by the health department, actually. And the health department has taken a very, very sort of broad brush, very conservative view of risk. And it's led to a lot of confusion. And we've been getting lots and lots of contacts from small businesses, and they don't understand the restrictions that have been put on them. They say, well, I can operate in a safe way if I do X, Y, and Z. But of course, the directions from the health department are not that sort of detailed. They don't understand the business at that level. And so they just are shut down and stopped from operating. And I can give you some good examples. Like I had an accountant contact me. This was in, I think, the second lockdown when you weren't allowed to travel to your place of business unless you're an essential business. And of course, accountants were at the coalface of helping small businesses manage what was going on. So things like, how do I get access to grants? How do I manage my cash flow and all this sort of thing? But this accountant needed to go back to his office to get physical paperwork, and he wasn't allowed to do that. And he's saying, well, I just don't understand this because, you know, I'm by myself. I'm going into an office by myself. I see no disease transmission risk, and yet I'm risking, you know, massive fines if I do this. So I just have to tell my customer, you know, I can't take that sort of risk. It'll bankrupt me, or, you know, put me in a serious financial situation. And so they've just had to tell their customers they just have to wait, which, you know, is unacceptable in lots of ways. But I mean, certainly we're seeing massive economic issues. It's not even though. I think that's quite clear. Some businesses are doing just fine. It sort of depends on the type of business. You know, restaurants is one that's been hit very, very hard because they depend on face-to-face interaction and this sort of thing. But, you know, other ones have done well and been able to manage well. So it's certainly not universal.
Yeah. Ron, as a business owner, just following on from what David said, how hard has it been to navigate through these times, and how difficult has it been really to try and keep people connected and businesses going, always starting and stopping and rules changing all the time?
Oh, look, and I suppose that BGL is a small business. I don't know what the definition of small business is these days. It keeps changing all the time, but we're predominantly a small business, and we're very lucky because we're in an industry where we haven't been severely affected in terms of our revenue and the way that the business operates. But the thing that's been hard is keeping everybody engaged, keeping people, I suppose, connected to the business, but also trying to dispel some of the fear that's being pumped out by our politicians and by our health workers. You know, when you've got health workers or health officials, when you've got, you know, health officials telling them, well, we're not going to give this vaccine to anyone in Queensland who's 18 because I don't want them to die of blood clots, coming from a chief health officer, or you've got a chief health officer in Victoria talking about how dangerous this virus is, where the reality is the numbers don't actually stack up to what the politicians and what the health officials are saying.
So the difficulty of navigating the fear is really difficult. And we know, David and Ron, based on what you're saying, is that depending on the industry that you're in really determines how well you get in or how well you get out of this. And I've picked this up from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. And when we look at those industries that clients operate in, which are easy or very easy to meet financial commitments, you'll see that financial insurance services, rental, electricity, mining, transport have all done okay. But those that are in arts, recreation, wholesale trade, accommodation, and retail trade, they're really suffering. And what the voice out there is saying, that they are going to struggle to meet their financial and their commitments going forward, which is going to have a huge effect on the economy. And David, are you seeing that, you know, that the statistics presented here weigh up with what you're seeing on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, this absolutely rings true. I think the other thing is that when the restrictions are eased, in many of these cases, everyone focuses on the lockdown, right? But in many cases, the easing of those restrictions is very gradual, and certain businesses can operate profitably after that, and others can't. And like even within one sector, like if we take restaurants, for example, a restaurant that has a small size with a large sort of component of takeaway meals that's outside of the city, they can probably operate okay with density limits and stuff like that, or limits on the number of patrons. But very large restaurants with large floor space, it's much more difficult for them because the overheads are much higher, and they need a lot of customers in order to turn a profit. Similarly, I've had a lot of contact with, you know, dance schools and karate schools and these sort of, you know, private lessons for recreation or education, and many of them, you know, like dance schools had a limit of 10 students, and it puts the business owners in this terrible situation where they can not only barely operate, you know, at a break-even sort of thing with those sort of small numbers. They have to choose which customers to turn away, and for a lot of these, you know, especially when it's kids with dance schools and karate and stuff, that it's a big part of their life, right? It's, you know, they love going to their dance school, or they love doing the karate or whatever they do. And the business owners and the instructors in these schools are put in this terrible position where they have to like tell some of their customers, you know, you can't come, or they have to try and figure out how to stagger it. And it's really traumatic for these businesses, because they want them to come, and they don't want to turn away their students that they care about.
Yeah, Ron, what do you see, Ron, also? I mean, given the space that we're in, and you talk to many accountants and people across many different industries, where are you seeing the real struggles, Ron? And maybe I'd also like, maybe if you could quickly share maybe one of your examples that you've used to be able to help, to give our audience ideas on ways that they can maybe help communities that are struggling.
Look, I suppose there's a couple of areas that I'm seeing. Certainly, restaurants and are suffering very badly from this, and the thing that concerns me more than the fact that they're just suffering at the moment is that they're making now long-term decisions based on what's going on today as to what's going to happen with their businesses. So I see restaurants cutting back shifts, cutting back service levels, cutting back all sorts of things. And that's not good for especially for younger people trying to get their first job in hospitality, or trying to earn some money while they're trying to get through school, and all that sort of stuff. So I think that's made it very difficult. The other one that just continues to surprise me is why they don't open gyms. You know, from what I understand, there has not been a transmission at a gym in this country at all, yet they never open the gyms until, you know, weeks and weeks later. You know, those guys are also, in most cases, small businesses as well. The gyms, the fitness studios, all those sort of things. And these guys are just getting crucified. One of the things that we did here with not this current lockdown, but the one before, was we actually gave each of the guys in the office, and I should say I wasn't the first person to do this because I heard somebody else did it, and I can't remember if I heard it on the radio or if I heard it somewhere else, but we gave everybody, oh, actually, no, I heard it at a CEO group. One of the guys in my CEO group gave each of his staff members $100 to spend in the local community. So we decided to give everybody $50 to spend in their local community to help the local shops, to do whatever they could to actually. Oh, somebody has told me they did have one infection in a gym. Okay, so we had one infection in a gym. But compared to the number of people that go to gyms and everything, it's pretty small. But the other side of it is that gyms are good for people's mental health, and that's been shown time and time again. Anyway, so we gave everyone $50. We said, look, go and spend it in your local community, go and help your local traders, and most of the guys in the office took that up, and I think that worked well. The other thing that I'm very keen on, and I know a lot of people aren't, is getting people back to the office as soon as possible. Because it's connections, and it's, you know, I've said all along through this whole fiasco that people need people, and you can't be connected to people over Zoom. You can't read body language over Zoom. You can't read facial expressions over Zoom, especially if people don't turn their cameras on. So you need people to be in the office, to be with other people, to keep them connected and keep them mentally fit.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that we've definitely seen is, especially in the accounting space where we're talking into, is that because of the detachment and people working from home, those incidental conversations, problem solving, opportunities and ability to talk to your peers has actually seen a decline in people's PD, or their skill set actually remaining at the same level where it was 12 months ago. And they're not progressing in the way that they should be. But what's really interesting here, and this was also taken from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, is the business ability to meet financial commitments over the next 3 months. So this was a survey done in August 2020, March 21, and then June 21. And you start to see that there is sort of a bit of a pattern going on here. But when we look at the overall small businesses across Australia, we can see here that only 16% have the confidence, or 16% are saying that they're going to find it very difficult to meet their commitments 36% around about neither easy or difficult. So when we combine those two figures together, there's a possibility about 52% of small businesses not able to meet their financial commitments. What sort of ramifications will this have, David?
Well, firstly, I'd like to comment on this data. It sort of concerns me that maybe there's a bit of selection bias going on here, because a lot of these businesses didn't make it. I hate to say, you only have to walk around the CBD in the city to see all the police signs to know that. So the ones that are left are the ones that are able to manage, but certainly there's been many businesses that have gone. But if they can't meet their financial commitments, obviously they're in trouble. And there's been some support from government, but in many cases it hasn't come near to covering their ongoing costs. And as Ron mentioned before, the idea of planning, I mean, they can't see an end to this, right? When's it all going to end? I mean, I don't think when we started talking about all this in March last year, if people said that we were in July 2021 and still just coming out of another lockdown, I don't think anyone would have believed it.
Agree completely.
Yeah, and so businesses now are like, many of them that I'm talking to, they're just despairing. They're saying, well, I can't see the end here. And I'm getting emails saying, this is it. Like, I'm done. Like, I can't, I used up all of my cash reserves at the last lockdown. I can't do another one. I'm finished. And it's really sad. Like, it breaks my heart when I see these people that have put in, a life's work into building up these enterprises, to have them crushed through no real fault of their own at all.
And look, and I know, talking to someone this morning from Sydney, that about 90% of their clients were affected. And those that have got strong balance sheets are fine, but then there are those that don't. And there's a real issue going on here. And apart from the financial side of it, Ron, I'd love your feedback on this. There's a whole heap of things happening insofar as, okay, we've got businesses there are some that are growing, there are some that will get through, there are some that have been closed down. But what we're seeing in general is a massive labour shortage. And there's been some changes that are taking place within the immigration laws that are making it impossible for people to stay within the businesses of which they've been employed in under certain visas. But there's such a lack of people out there. And I know some organisations that are looking for up to 400 people to fill positions, but they can't find people. So lockdown is not just about the financial side of it, but it's had a huge impact on immigration. Ron, do you want to just tell us a little bit about what we're going through to get people and get bums on seats? Because it's literally impossible.
Yeah, look, well, there's two sides to it. Firstly, it's very difficult to employ people by Zoom. You might be able to do interviews, but you can't induct through Zoom because you can't teach culture through Zoom. So that's I suppose the first side of it. And the second part of it is that we've always had skills shortages in this country, but the skills shortages, because of the lack of immigration over the past 18 months, have just been exacerbated. And just to make it even easier, two of the areas where we're looking for people, and I know a lot of our clients are looking for people, accountants and IT, were both taken off the priority list because the federal government decided that they wanted to get all Australians back to work. Well, that's really great, but you still need people with these skills. We've got 4 people, I think maybe even 5 people here, who were on visas that couldn't be renewed, and they'd have to apply for new visas, and because the government changed the rules, they weren't eligible. So somehow they were going to have to get out of the country, or they were going to have to go into the country to work because they couldn't work in Melbourne anymore. Luckily, probably a few months ago now, the categories were changed again, and we can now apply for visas for IT people and also for accountants. But there's been a shortage of sort of what you would call intermediate accountants for a long time. Sort of people with 3 to 6 years experience have been just really difficult to find. We're lucky we employ at the graduate level, but the grads coming out of, at the moment, because they're not in class, they're not getting practical experience in between time, and are probably not as good as the grads we've had in the past. So that's an issue that's come out of this as well. In terms of IT, it's just impossible. The people just aren't there. It's very difficult. The quality of people coming through is certainly an issue when we see that with some of the roles that we advertise for, that the quality of people is really dreadful. It's purely because people are trying to, well, two reasons, I think. People are, firstly, there's this whole big movement going on at the moment where people are saying, well, I've been locked down for 18 months. I haven't seen anybody. I'm not connected to the people I used to work with. I think I'm going to look for a job and go somewhere else. And this has become really a huge issue. Quite a bit in Australia, but certainly a lot overseas. And last weekend, the Harvard Business Review newsletter had 5 articles all about this sort of stuff that they actually distributed around to the team here, because it's really frightening in some respects.
Yeah.
So we've got those issues as well, on top of the issues that finding people that are suitable for roles is becoming more and more difficult.
And David, what are you seeing, David? Like, I'm sure that people will come to you saying, how on earth do I get the people to run my business? And I'm going to ask, I'll come back to that in a second, Dave, but I've had a question come through, which is a really interesting question. It's a bit loaded, but we'll see how it goes. I've just accepted a new role while negotiating a salary with a few companies. Many of them are saying, even though the market is hot, be careful not to negotiate too high, as when the market corrects, you'll be the first to go. Do you think that is true?
Oh, look, it's probably true. But the question is, are they going to be able to find other people to replace you? And we're a long way from having the markets, certainly in terms of accountants and in terms of IT people, get back to anywhere near the normality that we've had. If we haven't had students here for 18 months, even when we get them back, even if we do in another 12 months, it's still going to be another year to 2 years before you get them coming out and graduating. So I think this problem is just going to continue for a while. If somebody's finished a course online now, and even if it's been at an Australian university and they're stuck somewhere, or they're from somewhere in Asia or whatever, they're going to stay home at the moment and try and find a job at home rather than coming back here.
Yeah.
So it's going to take a long while before we actually get to a point where we can meet the needs that we have in terms of filling positions.
So, and David, what are you seeing and what are you hearing in this space?
I think Ron raised a really good point about students and the fact that your company employs a lot of graduates. We've seen the entire university sector hammered big time throughout this pandemic. It was Victoria's biggest export industry for many years. And, you used to walk around the city and see international students everywhere. They're all gone. All the apartments that they used to rent out, they're all gone. The universities are often largely empty. But one of the big advantages of having this big education industry was that there was a steady pipeline of graduates that could go into accounting or IT or any of these industries and get trained up. That they're gone. There's still some of them there, but like doing stuff online. But like Ron says, how are they going to get a job easily in Australia? It's just that it used to be sort of a given that you could maybe get a job after you get your degree and get a graduate position and you'd do okay, but they're just gone. And so you've got these massive shortage of graduates, but also the future pipeline. What's that going to look like? Are the universities going to be cutting courses? I know some of them have been cutting certain courses. You would expect that ones like accounting and IT wouldn't be cut, but certainly some other sort of specialist things, universities might be considering cutting them at the moment. So it's certainly a big issue. Plus the immigration issue. No one's coming here to live, and that they were a big source of skills, and they're gone as well. And some people want to leave too. Like some people have been either leaving the city, going to try and work in the country, or some people want to leave the country altogether. Like they might, many people in Victoria have family overseas, and they have a choice of whether they live here or not. And I'm sort of worried that once they open the borders, that a lot of people might choose to go.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for the border to open. I want to go north.
David, I know one of the things that you're really passionate about, and I've seen you take a pretty strong stance on is the City of Melbourne. And I know how dear the City of Melbourne is to you, and I know the same for you, Ron, but, like just the data that I've picked up from actually melbourne.vic.gov.au, the economic output of the City of Melbourne is down about 22% versus 15% the rest of Victoria. The City of Melbourne job losses are down 15% versus the rest of Victoria 9%. I know how much you love the City of Melbourne, Dave, but what are you seeing and why does this break your heart?
Look, you don't need statistics to know that there's trouble in the city. You only need to walk around and look. Like, the 4 lease signs alone are scary enough. And I've said this, like, I've worked in I used to work in the finance sector before I was elected, and I used to work down on Collins Street, and I used to go out for lunch all the time. Every day I'd go out for lunch to, my favourite place. We'd all discuss it in the office, which little lunch place would we go to. And recently I had someone ask me, a staff member asked me, oh, let's go out for lunch. And I recommended a place, and we went down there. It was a Korean barbecue place. I love Korean barbecue. And we went there and the doors were locked. The lights were off. It was all dusty, letters under the door, like they're gone. And so all these sort of businesses that, I thought were, institutions and part of the city, they're just gone. And it's so depressing when you see like a restaurant or something that you've been going to for years and years and years, and they're just all of a sudden they're gone. And, it's really upsetting. It's upsetting for, of course, for the business owners, but it's upsetting for the people in Melbourne. I think a big part of it is, a lot of the companies, of course, and the public service, they're all working from home, so they're not coming into the city. So all that retail and restaurants that depended on them, they're struggling, of course. Plus, I mentioned the international students. There was always heaps of them that lived in the city. They're gone now. You walk around, used to see them all the time, hanging around at cafes or going shopping together. You never see them anymore. And, like, what's the exit plan? Like, I'm not sure how that's all going to come back. Like, hopefully, students will come back one day and businesses will start bringing back workers. But I know a lot of businesses, a lot of major corporations who employ a lot of people in the city, they've been saying, well, we've sort of realised now that we don't really need all these people in the city, so we'll have a big contingent remain working from home for good, and maybe have operations out in the country and stuff. So that'll make it even harder for the city to recuperate. And the public services had, nearly everyone working from home for a long time.
Yeah. Ron, I know that you like to think things through, and what would you do to fix some things in the City of Melbourne, Ron? I know that we talk about this a lot, and I know you're passionate about it too, but what are some of the things you think they need to be doing to fix the City of Melbourne?
Well, the first thing is they've made it people unfriendly. Needs to be cleaned up. It's really, dreadful. I haven't walked along the end of Elizabeth Street recently, but I'm told you're tripping over people and tripping over syringes, and it's pretty dreadful. So I think that's the first thing they need to do, is clean it up. The second thing they need to do is get rid of half of these bike lanes, because it makes it impossible for people to get in. And look, I know myself, if I'm going into the city, I normally come in through Brunton Avenue, and you can't get in. You now, because they've put bike lanes in Exhibition Street, cut the lanes down, it's hopeless. It's just hopeless. So they've done that. I think the third thing is, until people get confidence back into the city and get confidence back into the state, that's not going to happen. And with the current group of politicians, I don't think people are ever going to have confidence. For the last 18 months, the politicians have been doing nothing but scaring everybody, and that doesn't bring up any levels of confidence at all. So when you listen to the scare-a-thons every morning from all over the country, and you just don't get any confidence. Plus, I don't think anybody has any confidence in the Lord Mayor. So I think you've got to have changes. You've got to have leadership, and we don't have leadership at the moment. We have followership, or we're being not brought along for the ride, but we're being directed as to what we should do, being lectured like school children. And I think people have had enough of it. And certainly that there's not a lot of confidence. You know, it's interesting we talk about public servants not coming back. I would have thought if the state government was seriously interested in fixing up the city, that it would compel public servants to come back, and it can, but it won't because it doesn't want to upset people. So I think that's that's a problem. And in terms of major corporations, well, we talk a lot here about at BGL about culture. But if you're not going to bring people back to your offices, or you're going to bring them in one day a week or one day a month or whatever, your culture will be dead very, very quickly. Now, you might say a lot of these places maybe had no culture in the first place, so maybe they've got nothing to kill. But the ones that think they have a culture won't have one very quickly. You can't teach culture over Zoom. You can't maintain culture over Zoom. You need people to be with people, and until I suppose a lot of these larger corporates realise that, and some have, by the way, because some are starting to now say, well, we need you in 3 days a week as a minimum, but a lot still aren't. I don't know. I feel very sorry for businesses in the city, because I think it's going to be a very, very, very long time before we get back to anything like what we were pre this pandemic.
Look, we've spoken a little bit about the financial side of it, the revenue side of it, the labour shortage side of it, just what the city looks like. But I know that this next one is a real hard one for many of us, and it's around the mental health. And the reason we bring this up to all our listeners is because all of your clients, whether directly or indirectly, are affected by these statistics. And I'm just going to run through a couple of them, and I've picked some data up. But during the last 12 to 18 months, 1 in 10 Victorians has been depressed. And 1 out of 10, pretty much 10%, have actually contemplated suicide. And what's even more really disturbing is that for the people who seek help, on average, a person waits about 10 years to get help. 65% of those never get help, and getting help has never been harder, because the resources that are available literally are not there, and people are having to wait 6 and 9 and 10 months to get any help. And then there's something else that's taken place within your clients' kids, where there's been huge increases to calls to the kids' helpline, a majority of them being 13 to 18-year-olds. And of the 13,000 calls during one period of time, I read somewhere that 1,100 required pretty much an immediate call out because those children were self-harming or in the process of suiciding. Now, this is a difficult topic, but David, I know that you've been so vocal about this, right? And I know that you've heard some stories that you can't even share on meetings. But what impact is this having on Victoria, on the people of Victoria? And then, Ron, I'm going to come back to you, Ron, about what effect it's having on the business, Ron, and the people within the business. So, David, I'd love you really to open your heart here, because I know that you're really passionate about this.
Thanks, Daniel, and I am. Look, I think long term, this is going to be the biggest cost by a mile, and I'm not talking cost in terms of money, although money will be a big cost. I'm talking in terms of the impact on people's lives. I've never seen anything like it. I took part in an inquiry last year. I'm on the Parliamentary Accounts and Estimates Committee. We did an inquiry into the government's response to COVID-19, and we heard a lot of data from different organisations about impacts on mental health, and they're all very shocking. As you can see, like talking about children self-harming and things like this. This is something that used to be very unusual, and only children in certain vulnerable environments you would see it, or with specific sort of mental issues. But it's become such a widespread problem, and certainly the stories that have been coming into my office, I've tried to reflect some of these stories. As you say, some of them are too shocking that I wouldn't even want to read them out in Parliament. But I've heard so many stories about children and people, business owners whose business has gone bankrupt and they've just lost it all. The stresses of parents having to manage learning from home along with working from home, that is just such a terrible stress on lots of families. the differing impacts on children as well. Like one thing that I've noticed, even with my own family, but I've spoken to many other parents about this. I've got 3 boys of my own. That it depends on their personality, how they deal with this learning from home thing. Like a sort of fairly introverted, self-driven type of personality, they seem to deal with it fairly well from what I've heard in speaking to people and from what I've observed. But the more sort of social personalities, the ones that like, hanging around with their mates and playing footy and doing all that, they suffer a lot during all of this. And you have to think about the experiences that are being taken away from these kids, like, a grade 6 student being denied their graduation, a year 7 student being denied, learning the ropes in their new, and one of my boys went through this, his first year of high school was basically, a lot of it was at home. Whereas it's meant to be, you're meeting new friends and, new people that you haven't really interacted with much, and new teachers and new rules and new environment. It's really hard to make friends via Zoom, and you're not doing all those activities. But on top of that is the physical health issues which I'm really concerned about. Children just aren't getting the exercise that they normally get. Like they don't run around with their mates and play in the playground. They're not doing all the sports that they normally do. Like after I think it was lockdown 3 or ended, my kids love to go swimming. So, the pool's finally opened. And so we went to the pool. And what was alarming to me is how many kids were there that were overweight. I just was really shocked by that. And it's understandable, right? Because they're just sitting at home all the time. And we used to, back in the pre-pandemic era, we used to talk about limiting screen time for kids, because it's bad for their concentration and all this sort of stuff. But like all time is screen time now. Even if they want to just relax and, hang out with their friends, they're doing it in front of a screen. So, like I'm not an expert in these things, but I certainly hear the stories, and I certainly fear for the long-term effects and on children. And the worst thing of all is that, and we've had this confirmed by the education, I've asked many times about this, the schools were never shut down to protect children. They never considered that children were in serious danger from this virus. The reason that they shut the schools down was to limit movement within the community. And I feel like we never really had that ethical and moral discussion about what are we really doing here? Like we're sacrificing the welfare of children to protect everyone else. Like I felt like that was something that was a very, very big decision that was made without really any public debate at all. I was quite upset about that. I don't really feel like they've got a good handle on the harm that's being caused.
Yeah. And Ron, that we've been through a difficult 14, 16 months, whatever it may be, now approaching 18 months, where we've spent nearly, 180 days locked down. And it's actually funny, I did a statistic the other day, it'll be less for you guys, but 1% of my life I've spent locked down, right? And people say it's not a big deal, but it is a big deal. And it's 1% of my life that I'll never get back. But I understand certain narratives and stuff too, but the overwhelming effect of all this has been really hard. And Ron, what have you seen take place in business? And maybe some of the things that we've done at BGL, Ron, would be great for you to share for people to see as examples of what they can do to pick their people up.
Yeah, look, I think we certainly through the lockdown last year, we ran a lot of programs internally to try to get people I suppose motivated, get them to do something else rather than just sitting at home working or watching TV. One of the things that's concerned me a lot in the last 12 months is the amount of time that people are spending working more than they would normally work, because there's nothing else or not a lot else to do. They're spending a lot of time in front of the screen. They're spending a lot of time, additional time working, and that's not healthy either. So I think that's certainly been good. But some of the things that we sort of did last year, we did a footy panel. We used to have Wednesday lunches. got somebody fixing the roof here. We've got Wednesday lunches. We've got we did gym classes and yoga classes and cooking classes and all sorts of things like that. We probably haven't done as much of it this year because the lockdowns have all been shorter, but certainly we did a lot of that last year, and I think that was good to keep people's spirits up in what's going on, with what was going on around them. Certainly encouraging people to get out and do exercise is important.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of stuff like that we tried to do last year to help people.
Yeah. One of the things that's taking place, and we know mental health in the workplace is, and this is a really some massive figures here. And the reason we're going through this is because we want the accountants and the people who have joined us today to actually get a bit of an insight as to what, if their clients aren't going through this directly, they're going through it indirectly, and there's got to be an understanding to be able to help them navigate through this. And the reality of it is that even in the accounting space, about 33% of people within the space are suffering some form of mental illness. And we know that accountants and those on the front line, and look, we talk about all sorts of people being on the front line, but when it comes to navigating all the funding, the support, all the financial stuff, pretty much the accountants have become the government's PA. And they're the ones that are doing all the heavy lifting and the work and doing all the application process. And they've really, really suffered through this period of time. So while, yes, your clients are suffering, understand that you're also going through your times too, and that this is also coming at a big cost to you too. What I just want to go through with David a little bit, and then also with Ron, obviously, is just, David, one of the things that I know that I've been really impressed with is just some of your discussions around proportionate responses. And I'd love the audience to hear, is there a better way? What is the better way? And what are some of the things that you'd like to put on the table for people to consider?
Yeah, so there's a few issues here, but I think, yeah, proportionate responses. So one of the things that I've been questioning a lot around is the proportionality of the government's response. Like, we know that, you know, if we lock down the entire state, we lock down everyone in their home, that it will prevent the transmission of disease. I don't think many people are arguing that that's not true. But we have to, you know, in the legislation, and, you know, common sense would tell you that, you know, we shouldn't be using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. In the legislation, it says that the response should be proportionate to the risk, and it should be the least restrictive of rights. And I've had very serious concerns about the proportionality of some of the responses. You know, some examples would be, you know, well, the example I gave before about, you know, the accountant driving to his office by himself to collect paperwork. Is that a proportionate response to stop his ability to work? Or is it a proportionate response to, you know, shut down regional towns when there's a few cases in the city? And I think many people have questioned these proportionate responses. You know, outdoor workers was another one that lots of people were upset about. You know, they're saying, I'm a gardener, you know, I work outside by myself. I don't come into contact with other people. I think there's lots of people who question the proportionality of these responses. And one of the things that I've been really upset about is when we've looked at or queried about that, people who ask questions like this, they tend to get demonized and attacked. And, you know, because they want to marginalize any sort of opposition to what they're doing. And the documents, like, they're meant to weigh up their response against the impact on human rights. And they do that through a human rights charter assessment. And they are doing this apparently, but we've actually put through motions in Parliament that have passed, and the government's claimed executive privilege on these. So they're refusing to release these documents that outline the calculations, effectively, the moral calculations that they've done on why they've taken people's rights away. Which I think if you're going to taking away someone's rights and liberties is a very, very serious thing. And we've just discussed some of the really serious impacts of doing that. Surely the public should be able to see the reasoning behind that. Absolutely. I mean, as I've spoken about before, like one of the other issues is about planning, right? Businesses need to plan. Like one of the things with restaurants, you know, they buy food and then they're told that they have to shut down the next day and they've got a fridge full of meat and vegetables that they've got to figure out what to do with. You know, for a big restaurant, it could be tens of thousands of dollars worth of ingredients, and they've got to figure out longer term planning. One of the things that I've been talking about is I think that in order to provide hope for people and to enable long-term planning, is that the government should be, and it would have to be national cabinet that does this, the government should be setting a date for when this is going to end. And, you know, I've said, you know, later this year would be probably a good time, but I'm open-minded about when that would be. I've suggested Cup Day, but the idea would be that there would be a period of time and during which everyone who wants to get a vaccine would have the opportunity to get one. And then we know that after that point, we're going to open up and deal with the consequences, because ultimately we have to deal with the consequences. We can't keep putting this off forever. There's always going to be a certain percentage of the population who the vaccine won't work for. There's going to be some people who choose not to get a vaccine. There's going to be some people who are not able to be vaccinated. So there's always going to be this risk when we open up. So we're going to have to deal with that eventually. We've been putting it off and putting it off, but eventually we're going to have to deal with that. And I think the best way to deal with that is to set a date. Now, this is not particularly original idea. They've done it in New York. They're sort of doing it in the UK and other countries. So I think it makes total sense for us to start discussing this, and just to give people some hope, like maybe people can, you know, soldier on for a bit if they know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. But, you know, all the messaging that we're hearing from the government is really vague, and the health officials, they're saying, oh, well, you know, we have to get vaccination up to a certain rate and it's not really going to get there for ages. And we're building these quarantine facilities that aren't even going to be opened until next year, which sort of implies we're going to be having these border restrictions forever. And it just really, people are losing hope, which I think is one of the major factors feeding into these mental health issues. People need optimism and hope for the future, and they're just not getting it at the moment.
Yeah, and look, and I suppose that some of the standoffs between some of the state and the feds are not helping anything either, is it?
Well, I tell you what, nothing seems to piss off business people more, from what my experience, than hearing a state or federal politician blame their state or federal counterpart for whatever's happening. I mean, people don't care whose fault it is, right? Like, and I think Australians are a lot more understanding than what politicians give them credit for. I think people understand that the situation we're in is quite unique, and that politicians and bureaucrats are going to make mistakes at dealing with this, but they just seem so stubborn and unable to acknowledge those mistakes and stuff-ups that they've made, and there's been a lot, and say, you know, I think what would give people a lot more confidence is if they said, we made this decision at this point in time, now that we've examined it in hindsight, with the benefit of hindsight, we think we could have done it a better way. We think we could have done it X, Y, and Z. And so in the future, we're going to do it this way. And then people say, well, yeah, they're actually learning from things that they've done wrong. They're changing the way that they're dealing with things. And, you know, maybe they're doing some of that behind the scenes, but we don't actually see it. Yeah. We don't have any visibility of that. No one actually knows what sort of learnings are going on here. From the outsider's point of view, and even from, you know, my point of view within Parliament, it just seems like, you know, okay, they're doing it a bit different this time. And when we come out, it's a bit different this time. Like, you know, this time apparently lockdowns ended today, but, you know, we're not allowed to visit people, but we're allowed to go to a pub or something. And, you know, like, people don't get it. Like, I don't get it. Like, you know, yeah. How does that make sense? So people want to visit their mums. They want to visit their family and stuff, and they can't do that. So what are we going to do? We're going to go maybe meet at a restaurant or something. I mean, you know, that's fine, but, you know, how is that a better risk profile than going something to someone's home or something? Like, I don't understand that. And they need to explain this stuff, like, because people are losing faith in what they're doing.
What wasn't the argument, David, around that if people go into their houses, that they might hug each other, and assuming, of course, that if they go to a restaurant, they wouldn't hug each other. So, you know, just But I think you're right. I think people would like to see politicians actually take responsibility rather than find out reasons why not to take responsibility. You know, we still haven't heard from Andrews anything around the fiasco of last year. And he thinks that everyone's forgotten about it. I hope that they remember about it at the election, and remember the mess and the 800 people that died on his watch. But look, who knows? Who knows what will happen? I think you're right. I think taking responsibility, and one of the things I've argued about a lot with this is how proportionate the response is, because things like curfews at night, because it was easier for the police to keep track of what was going on if you put everyone in curfew, is not a reason to have a curfew. 5 kilometre limits of where people can travel is not have to be justified with something, and so far we've seen absolutely no justification for why they want to do that. Oh, it's to stop movement, but hang on, it's not stopping movement. What's the difference moving between 5 kilometres or 25 kilometres or 50 kilometres, or 100 kilometres? You still got movement.
Yeah.
So really, there's just no logic behind a lot of the things that these people are doing. But I think the big problem comes about because the people making the decisions, the people in the health department making these decisions of what to do, have never actually had to run a business. They've never actually been in the real world where they have to actually earn a salary by selling something rather than getting paid by the public purse. And there's been a lot of talk recently that politicians' salaries during this process should be cut 10 or 20% so that they feel the pain. And look, I don't know if that, and public servant salaries as well. So not just picking on politicians.
Politicians, that's fine by me.
That was an aha moment.
Look, this is something that they did in New Zealand at the beginning, but I don't know of anywhere else in the world it's been done. I haven't heard. Look, there might have been other places, but you're right. People need to have something to look forward to, and until we get enough vaccine and we get vaccine choice as well, I don't think we solve the problem. One of the big things, and I haven't taken this a lot further at the moment, but the AstraZeneca vaccine is not approved in Europe or in apart from the UK. The UK is not part of Europe anymore, so we're okay with that, and not approved in America. So does that mean if I have the AstraZeneca vaccination and I go to America, they will say I'm unvaccinated?
That's a very good point that I hadn't really thought of before.
Yeah.
You raised some great points, Ron, and in particular, the idea that the people making these directions don't really understand the on-the-ground impact of those directions at all. And it's not just on businesses either. I mean, I can give you one issue that I've raised many times, and everyone's trivialized this issue, but I can tell you it's not a trivial issue, is around mask mandates. Now, my thoughts from the start have been that they shouldn't be mandatory, that the government should provide good guidelines that are backed by evidence on when you should use them. But they haven't done that. They've mandated them. And that people say, well, it's no big deal. You just put on the mask when you need to and, just do what you're told. But as it turns out, there's a whole bunch of people that have exemptions to mask wearing. So people who have respiratory illnesses, so lung conditions like COPD, emphysema, asthma, these sort of things, but also people who are victims of trauma. This can be physical trauma, sexual assault, all sorts of other issues, mental illness. So people with autism sometimes and other mental illnesses can't wear them. And so what we've seen happen is that these people have ended up being discriminated against. They get yelled at in the street, they get stared at, they get refused access to businesses, they can't get medical care, they can't go to the pharmacy. And, I've had so many people contact my office about this issue. I've had women who are victims of sexual assault who are too scared to leave their house. I've had a mother with a teenage child who suffers autism, who they're too scared to go to the supermarket because people stare at them and they might have a confrontation. people with mental illness who are too scared to go to the pharmacy and buy their medication because it's too confrontational for them. All these horrible, horrible issues. And the government doesn't seem to give a stuff about it. Like, I've brought it up with the Chief Health Officer, I've brought it up with the Deputy Chief Health Officer, I've brought it up with the Health Minister, I've brought it up with the Attorney General. They're all aware of it, they all know about it, they all acknowledge it. Yet they won't stand up at the presser and say, hey, if you see someone not wearing a mask, could you just be kind to them and not discriminate against them and, you know, just mind your own business. Instead, they sort of, you know, have this sort of doing the right thing and doing the wrong thing mentality, and anyone who's not wearing a mask is doing the wrong thing. And there's sort of no respect for people's personal circumstances. And in many cases, you know, it's very traumatic for some people to have to over and over and over revisit this reason why they can't wear a mask. You know, you can imagine if you're a victim of trauma having to go through that every single day, like how horrible that is. And that's just one example. When I brought it up with the Cho initially last year, he wasn't even aware of it. Like, you know, they just weren't aware of it. And, you know, they're aware of it now, but, and that's just one example. Like, there's serious unintended consequences of so many of these things, and expecting small businesses to police all this stuff. Like, you know, like they expect them to police the QR codes and the mask mandates and all this sort of stuff. And like, some businesses have just said, look, it's too hard, I just won't allow anyone in without a mask, right? And you can hardly blame them, because they're terrified of, you know, WorkSafe or someone coming and cracking down on them and getting a fine and stuff, and they're on the ropes already. But, you know, ultimately it's the mandates that have caused all these issues.
Correct. And look, just in the interest of time, and I know that we could talk forever, but I just want to just quickly sum up something for the accountants, which I think is really important, because that's the majority of our audience today. Well, in thinking about your relationship with your clients, stay close to your clients during this time. Continually review their data. Make sure that you're on top of what's going on, and make sure that you've got your alerts and your indicators on, so that you can be on the front foot and you can deal with their issues as they take place. And it's really, really important that during this time, you're also doing things like educating and informing your clients about the support that's available and what's out there to be able to help them through this time. And one of the big things that I've heard and I've seen people do is they're engaging with the ATO and talking to the ATO about any outstanding debts and coming up with payment arrangements and stuff like that, to be able to just ease the burden on small businesses. So set your data feeds up, set your software up, check across the various platforms, look into the data, make sure that you're across what's going on within your clients' businesses, and react to that which is taking place, proactively engage with them on a regular basis to make sure that you give them the best chance of getting through. With the small business support, this is including micro business, sole traders, small non-profits. Our friends from Illuminate have given us an incredible sheet, which is basically a one-page summary of what is available. And you've got the business cost assistance program, the licensed hospitality venue fund top up, the COVID disaster payment, the community sporting recreation club payments, the event support package, the life performance support, and the Alpine support program. Now, what I'll do is that for all the attendees, I'll make this sheet available so that you can get access to what's available and the things that are at your disposal to be able to help your clients. But it's really important that you're across this and that you help your clients navigate their way through this to be able to get the funding that they're entitled to, and hopefully it will help them see them through the other side of this situation that we find ourselves in. So, David, Ron, sorry, David.
This is a great resource. Why doesn't the government do this?
Yeah, the Andrew's a great person, and he was very, very eager to jump on and do things like this, because we think that it needs to be simple for people to be able to see it and people to get access to stuff, so that, you know, laying it out in such a way makes it easy for people to be able to negotiate and navigate their way through things. But David and Ron, it's just on 2:00. And
by the way, David, you're welcome to a copy of this.
Oh, thank you. I'll share it on social media. I'm sure lots of people will find it useful.
Andrew would love you to share that. Just to both of you, it's been fantastic talking to you for the last hour, and you know, I'm a big supporter of you both, and I love what you do and represent. And I think that, you know, there probably be a time to do something more like this in the future. Ron, you agree? David?
Definitely.
I'd love to.
our community is a great community, and we really appreciate them and their support and what they do for us. If you'd like to contact us, here's our details. I've only put on here our LinkedIn details and our Twitter details. David's quite active on all on those, as is Ron, as am I.
I'm not active on Twitter, so
No.
contact me on LinkedIn.
Ron's not that active on Twitter, but yesterday I saw you put a tweet out,
No,
or the other day,
no, somebody might have put one out for me.
maybe.
Maybe there's the fake Ron Lesh. I don't know.
But David, I think maybe one of the things that we discussed in the past might be something about, leading closer to the election over the next couple of months, about how the upper house works.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Because I think that's really important, that people start taking their view and their votes seriously, because it makes a massive difference to the outcomes for Victoria.
Yeah, I'd love to. And look, I've never met more people become engaged in politics as what I have recently. It's just been incredible, because people are wanting to know what's going on. So yeah, it's good.
Well, on behalf of BGL, David, I'd like to thank you. You've been amazing, and continue to be the voice that you are. And I know that everything you stand for is not always popular, but it's not about being popular. It's about having a conviction, and you stand by it. And I love that. And Ron,
I appreciate it.
and Ron, I know, I've been working with you for 24 years, and you're never afraid to say what you think, and what you say actually makes sense. And I just wish more people would listen, because you have got a very, very wise head on your shoulders. So thank you. To everybody, we will make the recording available. We will send out that little one-page thing. David, I'll send it through to you too, because it might be good to put on your Facebook stuff and on your LinkedIn, because it is a very good resource.
Yes.
Thank you all once again. And look, we'll run something again very soon. So thank you to everybody that's attended. Have a great day.
Everyone.
See ya.